Hey, it's James Lynch. If you missed it yesterday, the UFC parted ways with welterweight Rinat Fakhretdinov. This according to Tom Feely, who keeps track of the UFC's roster, and Nolan King from MMA Junkie going out there and actually confirming it, saying that Rinat Fakhretdinov and the UFC have indeed parted ways. Sources say Rinat, despite being 6-0-1 in the UFC, was not re-signed after he fought out his deal. And this is kind of a bit concerning because of the fact that we've got a fighter here that, again, has never lost in the promotion. For the most part, is very exciting. He's coming off a quick win in his last fight, in a fight which, let's be honest, I remember when they made that fight with Andreas Gustafsson, it kind of looked like, what are they doing here? Gustafsson only had the one UFC fight. It almost looked like they wanted Gustafsson to win that fight to a certain degree, right? Because you got this sort of newcomer, and Renat's been in the UFC for a while, and Rinat went out there, spoiled the plans, gets a 54-second knockout. So you can't even say this is a fighter that's boring, because he's very, he goes out there usually to finish. There's been a couple decisions in there, but you remember the Kevin Lee fight, the Brian Battle fight, which was a total domination in that one. Did have the split against Nicholas Dalby, but for the most part, this is a guy that goes out there and finishes. Now, one thing that Andy Hickey has chimed in on, and by the way, Andy, a great follow on Twitter, he believes expect more of this and overall reduction in Russian fighters on the UFC roster. UFC is a business. Money is the bottom line. Forget about sport or meritocracy. The vast majority of Russian fighters, as elite as they've shown themselves, do not generate revenue. And this is something that I think is true, because if you look at some of the ways they've been doing the matchmaking, we've talked at length on this channel about some of the title shots they've handed out. For example, Diego Lopez getting a title shot after losing to Alex Volkanovski this past April. You've got this Paddy Pimblett and Justin Gaethje fight when Arman Tsarukyan's on the sidelines. We've got Movsar Evloev, who can't seem to get a featherweight title shot and has been sidelined, didn't get to fight at all in 2025. So we are noticing a trend, and I know there will be fans who talk about how, this is because the UFC is discriminating against certain ethnicities and all that. I don't think that's what it is. I've said this before. The UFC is a business. I agree with Andy here. A lot of the decisions they make are what they feel is best for business, but I don't like the way this is going, honestly. Like, I get that not every fight's going to be super exciting. I get that certain fighters maybe aren't as entertaining as other fighters. For example, we had, a lot of backlash and outcry from the way that Khamzat Chimaev beat Dricus du Plessis, or Islam Makhachev beating Jack Della Maddalena. I don't think those fights were boring. It would have been great to see a finish, but I also think that certain fighters have a way of dominating a fight, and that doesn't mean the fight is necessarily boring. But I also think the UFC is trying to avoid that as they go forward. So my kind of theory is, I agree with Andy here that they are trying to change the way they do things. I think at this point, why are we even using the rankings? Because it seems like they're not following it. If you look at, like I said, some of the title shots, some of the matchmaking they've got there, they're clearly not following the rankings. They're trying to go based off entertainment, based off all types of different things. And, you can point to situations in the past where, there's been title shots that maybe weren't deserved, but I find that it's getting worse, because I always get people in the comments being like, oh, you're new. What do you mean? The UFC's been like this for a while. Yeah, they have had bad title shots in the past, but I think right now it's getting even worse. And I think this all ties together. Again, a guy like Rinat should not be cut. The only thing I will say about Rinat, where I do kind of understand it from the UFC's perspective a little bit, is he is 34. Like, if this was like a 20-year-old up-and-coming fighter that was undefeated, I don't know if they necessarily release him, but I think they look at it as, is Rinat going to be turning a corner? Is he going to be making some huge jump in his career? I mean, he's looked good. Again, he's got some good wins here. But he also hasn't fought like the best opposition either. But that's also the UFC's fault, because they're not matching him up against with some good competition. Remember, he was supposed to fight Gabriel Bonfim back in February this year. He ends up withdrawing from that fight. Again, that's a fight where I think they wanted Bonfim to win. They keep going to Brazil. They keep building up those guys. You look at some of the matchups they've been making. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. And I agree with Andy here. Now, if you look at some of the comments here, I don't think I'm alone. A lot of people are going like, what's going on? And by the way, forget about Rinat. Remember Martin Buday earlier this year? You've got heavyweight division right now, which is one of the weakest it's been in years. If you look at this top 10, let me just go down to the bottom here. You've got, you got like Talshin Teixeira at like number 15. Like, in any other weight class, he would not be top 15. But you got a guy like Buday who didn't lose in the UFC. They part ways with him. I think this leads more to what Andy's saying here. So if you look at the comments, people saying, boo, the UFC doesn't re-sign Rinat, but keeps Tai Tuivasa. Great point. Tai Tuivasa, 5-fight losing streak. Rinat Fakhretdinov undefeated in the UFC. He gets cut. Now, again, this goes to entertainment. Who do you think is more entertaining? Who do you think more people gravitate towards as fans? They gravitate towards Tuivasa. But I agree with the fans here. We're getting away from this being a sport and it being more of who do you like the most? What is more entertaining? And the UFC worrying so much more about business. My whole thing is this, is that yes, the UFC obviously wants to put on good cards and put on, events that are going to view well and all that. But you've got this new deal with Paramount. You got the bag. Why are we going away? Like, it's almost like they're doing the opposite. They're getting more money now, but now they're going away from actually having this as a sport. I think you could get away with some cards being lower, maybe not viewed as high from a business perspective because of the fact they got this new deal. So I don't really understand that. Justice for Mokaev, Hamdi, and Renat. Yeah, Hamdi was another one that got released. Mokaev, again, I'm kind of like, listen, the thing that people keep leaving out with Mokaev is he was a pain in the ass to deal with behind the scenes with the UFC. He was also one that shouldn't have been cut, but the UFC was looking at it as this is a guy that doesn't finish fights, and he's also tough to deal with. That's an easy recipe for them to release him. So just wanted to point that out about Mokaev, that you've heard from multiple fighters, multiple people behind the scenes that Mokaev was tough to work with. Again, a lot of people talking about how they are, not happy with this. And I'm glad fans are being outspoken about this the same way that they've been outspoken with some of the title shots that have happened lately. Baffled, what a terrible organization. Totally agree here. So yeah, no one really happy about this. I feel the same way. Like, I think, again, the only thing I could say about Renat is that he is a bit older, and I understand the UFC parting ways with guys that are in sort of their mid 30s, and he was a good interview. I've interviewed him a couple times. He's great. Good personality. Again, and he's finishing fights. Like, I can understand if this is a guy that keeps going the distance, but majority of his fights do end up ending in finishes. He's got 12 wins by knockout. If we look at Andy's tweet here, some of the comments as well, people kind of doing that. Are they especially expensive? Gugabi mentions in. TV rights in Russia's don't pay a dime from what I've read. Front Row Brian has talked about this. I know, but Renat can't be more than like $30K show. I get you don't want to have Ankalaev as champ getting a premium paycheck, killing marquee division entertainment levels, but cutting Renat seems weird. I would agree with that. TKO's changed the goalposts. Isn't that why they lowballed Vadim Nemkov? Possibly. I mean, what was the kickboxer that Artem, I forget his last name, the guy that Pereira had fought in kickboxing? Same thing. They lowballed him too, right? And so that's why he's like, no, I'm not going to come to the UFC. I'm good. I'll stay in kickboxing. Current pay structure seems to be drying up any marketable Western talent. There's only so many times the general public would pay to see Superman lift a car above his head. I guess that's true. The fight announcements, Q1, scream loudly, clear shift in strategy. So this is kind of the point of this video. I think they are changing strategy. I think you're going to see more of this. I think you're going to see more fighters cut or have less of a leash, even if they're good. I think they're going to base it off of how are you good for our business? Are you entertaining? Are you someone that's a brand? Are you someone that connects with fans? Are you doing a lot of media? I think all these things tie in together. That's what I think here. Devoid of any heavyweight or women's fight announcements, and a lot of Eastern Europeans seem to be getting shelved. Paddy, Gaethje, Fiziev, Rufi, etc. Just fun fights for casuals too. I think that's the big thing there. They're really catering to casuals. And this is why I said, like, for example, Sean O'Malley's fighting Song Yadong. Like, don't be shocked if Sean O'Malley skips the line if he wins that fight over Umar, over some of these other guys in the weight class, and fights Piotr Jan next. I think they're leaning more towards that direction. So, again, like, I get some of the business stuff that they do. Like, I understand it. Like, again, I understand trying to get Paddy in a title fight. Paddy's a big marketer for them. But I think we're going too far with this. I don't think you should be cutting Renat. I don't think you should be, cutting out a guy like Umar if he wins his next fight. Like, I'm not saying that's officially going to happen, but I kind of think that's the way they're going. Like, imagine Sean O'Malley gets another title shot this year. Like, he's had how many over the last couple of years? Like, I think, when it boils down to it, UFC is going to lose some fans doing this. I think they're going to gain more fans by having more popular fighters. But this, again, if they want to create more stars and build more marketable fighters, this is the happy medium. I think you do less events, you cut the roster down, you spend more time marketing the guys you have, and you space out the events. Because the problem that they keep having is they have a big event and then we're already on to the next one, and you kind of forget what just happened, and they don't give us time to build up stars and build up big names here. And I think, rather than cutting guys that they don't like and bringing in new guys that aren't as talented, I think the way to do it is to try and build up the talent you have. Because yeah, it just sucks. So, like, I feel for Renat. I'm sure he's going to, there's lots of promotions that'll be dying to sign him. I'm sure there's ACA, Octagon, KSW. There are a lot of international promotions out there. So I think he'll be okay. I think it just sucks for MMA fans that you're not seeing the best fight the best anymore. So I want to know what you guys think in the comment section below. Are you noticing this trend as well, especially with a cut like this? By the way, Zaleski got cut too. There's someone else who got cut as well recently. I just think this is kind of like a dangerous trend that we're really getting away from this being a sport and this being more about who's more popular. I understand the UFC is a business. They want to make money, but I don't know if getting rid of Renat, who's still going to get you a highlight reel knockout, how that's worse for business than, say, some guy who might be more marketable but is going to a decision. I don't understand that. They'd have to explain that to me. Follow me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, @Lynch on Sports. My name is James Lynch. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.